On February 28, 2026, a joint U.S. and Israeli air campaign struck Iranian military and nuclear sites. The shockwaves hit New Delhi before the fires were even contained. Iran immediately retaliated by closing the Strait of Hormuz. They deployed a total naval blockade, halting every commercial vessel. Crude oil and 65% of liquid petroleum gas imports were frozen. This reveals a fatal oversight. While the government held a 30-day crude oil reserve, it possessed zero strategic reserves for LPG. The domestic impact was nearly instantaneous. With no backup supply, commercial cooking gas prices soared, forcing 1 in 5 commercial kitchens in India's major cities to shut down within a week. The paralysis quickly reached the industrial sector. In the massive ceramics hub of Morbi, over 170 factories powered down their kilns as industrial propane supplies simply vanished. A conflict 1,500 miles away managed to freeze the Indian economy in days. It demonstrated that in a total war, a political posture of neutrality cannot compensate for a lack of physical energy security. Beyond the physical blockade, Washington launched an economic offensive, aggressively enforcing a maximum pressure campaign through secondary sanctions. These sanctions stipulate that any foreign company using the U.S. financial system to buy Iranian energy will be banned from the global banking system. Adani Enterprises became the primary example of this enforcement in May 2026. The Indian conglomerate had purchased Iranian LPG through a middleman in Dubai. Adani ignored supply chain red flags and cleared over $192 million in payments through U.S. banks to settle the trade. The U.S. Treasury responded with a $275 million penalty, a clear warning to any firm attempting to bypass the energy blockade. Terrified Indian banks immediately froze regional transactions, leaving billions of dollars in agricultural exports, including massive quantities of basmati rice, stranded at domestic ports. This structural reliance on the U.S. dollar makes true political multi-alignment nearly impossible. Corporate survival in India is now tied directly to U.S. financial compliance. For 20 years, India's master plan was to build trade corridors that could bypass its rival, Pakistan. They bet heavily on 2 routes, one striking north through Iran's Chabahar port, and the IMEC corridor heading west to Israel. The northern route collapsed when U.S. sanctions waivers expired. India withdrew its personnel and abandoned a $120 million investment, leaving the port to stall. The western IMEC route became unviable just as quickly. The regional war and sudden border closures rendered the entire multimodal network structurally impossible. India's diplomatic neutrality was also under strain. Just 48 hours before the first missiles were fired, Prime Minister Modi was inside the Israeli Knesset, solidifying a new strategic partnership. This followed a February trade deal where India agreed to phase out its use of Russian crude oil in exchange for access to U.S. defense technology. These ties were exposed at the 2026 BRICS summit. India refused to join its partners in condemning the strikes on Iran, fracturing the alliance and alienating much of the global south. The structural pull of U.S. capital, advanced Israeli technology, and the threat of sanctions left New Delhi with a single viable path. Neutrality was no longer an option when corporate survival required choosing a side. The 2026 war revealed a harsh reality. A foreign policy of strategic autonomy is effective during peacetime, but it is a liability during total war. The 2026 crisis demonstrated that domestic energy security is now inseparable from military alliances. To adapt, India is shifting its focus to physical resilience. This begins with the construction of underground storage caverns to hold a mandatory 45-day national buffer of liquid petroleum gas. Simultaneously, the country is accelerating its transition to green hydrogen. Decoupling the manufacturing sector from Gulf supply chains is now a matter of national survival. To protect its economy, New Delhi is also establishing sanctions advisory units to help Indian firms navigate a landscape where the U.S. dollar is a primary tool of warfare. A rising global power secures its autonomy by building the internal economic and physical resilience needed to function when global markets fail. The ability to keep the country running while the rest of the world goes to war is the ultimate measure of independence.